Grey Zone Warfare. The upcoming spiritual successor to extraction looter shooters like Escape from Tarkov, looking to make its mark with unique changes to the genre. Based in an entirely open world with multiple opposing factions facing off in the idyllic jungles and rural villages of Southeast Asia, I and many other content creators like myself were fortunate enough to take part in an early access testing period for just over a week, where I was able to spend some time with the game and form some thoughts and opinions on the current state of Grey Zone, which I'll be going over in this video. Keep in mind once again that the game is in an early access state, and as a result it's likely to have some issues it needs to resolve. If you enjoy the video, be sure to drop it a like and subscribe to the channel. I've been doing some more review videos lately, so you might find some other games you're looking at on my channel too. Okay, let's get into it, starting with the world that you'll find yourself in. Now, the map is stunningly beautiful, there's just no other way to put it. There's a great mix of fully animated lush foliage with a sprinkling of built-up areas throughout. Flying from your faction headquarters to your LZ really helps to showcase how gorgeous the environment actually is. We took a couple of long walks to distant areas of the map in the time that we spent with the game, and that was equally as impressive when mixed with the other design choices built to immerse you in the experience. The lighting is well balanced, helping to put together a graphically stellar game. Grey Zone runs fairly well on my 3070, between about 70 to 90 frames quite often, and I've a couple of friends running this on 40 series cards with in excess of 140 frames too, which for a game of this scale in early access is pretty damn good. As the game is refined and polished, we're likely to see this improve even further. That said, I can't really comment on how this would run on any equipment lower than this, so keep that in mind and maybe try to do some extra research if you're running a 20 or 10 series GPU. And you know, I can't really fault the map design choices within the overarching environment either. There's some frankly awesome points of interest to discover, and they're all incredibly well detailed to ensure you feel immersed in the experience with the help of your surroundings. As an example, we took a long walk to an airfield, but along the way we decided to check out something else, designated only YBL-1 on our map. This excursion turned into a deep dive into an underground bunker system that we absolutely didn't expect to find. Tight corridors, spooky atmosphere supported by low lighting, and plenty of enemy fighters tucked around every corner made it a genuinely enjoyable exploration exercise that kept us on our toes throughout. Whether you're wading through shallow rivers, crossing vast flooded fields, or taking a stroll through the streets, there's plenty of sights to be taken in with Grey Zone Warfare. Now, the interesting part here, and something that sets Grey Zone apart from games that you might naturally compare it to, is that there's no loading screens or instancing after you join the game for the first time. When you're done with your mission, you head to an LZ, call in a little bird, and you're back to HQ where you can get ready to go out again. If you die, you're back to HQ, but you're still in the same instance of the world, meaning that you can actually go and rejoin your teammates once you're sufficiently geared up again. I see this as a massive positive, because you're not just sitting on the sidelines waiting for your team to finish up if you die. You can actually try to rejoin them, and there's less time spent waiting to get into games. You still lose the gear from your stash, of course, but you do have the chance to go and get it back. Now, the environment is brought together by some very fitting ambient sounds, not least of all the local wildlife you'll hear when wandering through the jungle. It really does help to sell the experience, and I have to say, this is probably one of my favourite parts, if not the best part of the game for me. The way the map design, lighting, and audio come together to create something truly special. That said, when it comes to the audio, the firearms could really use an upgrade. They're okay, but in my opinion, they're certainly not a standout part of the experience, and for a tactical shooter, I'd expect them to be. It's tough to explain, but it doesn't really feel like the weapon sounds have quite enough punch to them. Maybe it's a lack of bass, I'm far from an audio engineer really, so I'm not quite sure, but they just don't sound quite right. We also struggled to work out when exactly we were being shot at, since the whips and cracks you'd usually expect from bullets passing overhead weren't really functioning as they should have in the test. Anyway, have a quick listen for yourself across a couple of firefights we had featuring some different weapons. Okay, so we've talked about the overarching map design, the graphics, and the audio, but this is a tactical shooter, right? And with that, we'd expect some kick-ass combat sequences, so let's get into how that feels next. Now, you can clearly tell that the game goes for a tactical feel, focusing on slow-paced movement, realistic weapon handling, and a focus on cover-to-cover movement. That said, it does come across as clunky in places when leaning and moving simultaneously, for example. This is incredibly slow and can't actually be used to round a corner in PvP because of that. Greyzone sells the tactical feel, and things are generally slower paced than most other shooters, which I'd say is a good thing for a game like this, but it does need a bit of polishing in places. This goes for the animations too, with some of them being really impressive, like mag checking, wading through water, or completing medical tasks, but the sprinting animation is absolutely comical and definitely needs an overhaul. It looks like my PMC is running for the bathroom after a dodgy Mexican takeout, not running into a firefight. Now, unfortunately, the subpar firearms audio and a not so consistent standard of animation undercuts an otherwise well put together and immersive tactical experience. Sadly though, that's not all of the issues combat can have too, with several content creators, including myself, experiencing some encounters with incredibly bullet spongy AI that just refuse to die in a timely manner. Seriously, if these guys were medieval knights, they'd be wearing all black and saying "'tis but a scratch." It's worth noting though that there are several types of ammo in Greyzone, and the early ones definitely require a few more shots than the rest, whereas higher level ammo deals with enemies faster. The ammo system is very reminiscent of Escape from Tarkov, with multiple types available for different purposes. I can see this being a little bit overwhelming for some, so it's something to be aware of. At longer distances, especially if your weapon isn't upgraded significantly, there's also a decent chance your rounds won't land exactly where your crosshair is placed, and this can also play into some frustrating engagements where you feel like you should have killed the target and just didn't. I get what they're going for, upgrades are important after all, but shots not landing where your crosshair is just never feels good, just like it doesn't feel great to dump 6 to 8 rounds into someone and not see them go down. Now, the best overall way I can describe the AI here, and again I'm going back to Escape from Tarkov because it's one I feel everyone knows, it's like the very early scavs when the game was very new. They refuse to die, they often spin round and one-tap you from a mile away or spot you at long distances through foliage, or they're just completely the opposite and just dump an entire magazine without hitting you. Essentially, they need some serious work to be in a place that feels good. Back to some more positive aspects though, let's take a quick look at the user interface in the various systems associated with the gameplay in order to make things more meaningful. In Greyzone, that takes the shape of quests, traders, and factions. Now, questing is meaningful, taking you to different areas of the map and pushing you to explore new regions. I do think perhaps you spend a little bit too much time in the very first town closest to your HQ, but it does serve to give you a good period of time to learn the game where the chances of PvP are much lower, because you're further away from the other faction HQ locations. There's a good mix of acquiring items, exploring points of interest, killing AI, or marking key items with trackers, to name just a few of the objectives you'll have. Reading the quest text will give you hints towards the areas you'll need to visit, but they might not give you everything you need, so it's partly using the resources you have and partly exploring, or watching YouTube videos if you prefer, which I can see there being a lot of when this game hits the deck for the public. Trading, on the other hand, is straightforward and easy to work with. For each faction, you'll find 3 traders, each with different quests to give you and different items that they'll sell you. Not much more to say about this, honestly, other than it's a really nice feature that is something a lot of games tend to struggle with. Making this so easy to use is a godsend, although I do kind of wish there was a search feature for the traders so we didn't have to go through each individual item looking for the right mount for the scope I'm using at the time. Greyzone also has a kind of neat built-in messaging and invite system, so you can send other operators messages, check your inbox for yourself, and even invite other players on the fly whilst out in the world so that you can squad up with them for the remainder of your deployments together. Now, I have mixed feelings about the faction system in Greyzone. For those that don't know, there are 3 factions, and once you choose one of them, you are locked to that faction permanently. On the one hand, this provides a clear-cut PvP experience where you'll have a good chance of creating friends whilst out on a mission because your faction members are marked on the map, and you can have organic encounters with them. You'll also know who the enemy is simply by checking your map and seeing there are no friendly operators in your area. There's no real room for betrayal or being stabbed in the back here. On the other hand, if you pick a different faction to that of your friends, as it stands you will never be able to play with that friend because you are inherently their enemy and cannot be added to their squad. The best thing I can think of here is to maybe implement a feature where you have the ability to switch factions after a certain point in the game so that friends can still play together at the cost of some currency maybe. I'm sure there would be other better suited workarounds, but it's something to be aware of either way if you're thinking about picking this game up after launch. Now, early on in the testing period, crashes and game-breaking issues were unfortunately pretty common, and it was a bit of a 50-50 experience on whether I was going to make it through each excursion without either myself or a member of my squad having an issue of some kind that meant we had to go back to the main menu. That said, I have to hand it to the devs. They worked very hard on fixing as many bugs and issues as they could during the testing period, and this was much better by the end of the test. A lot of hit registry and bullet sponging was fixed up too, although there are still some instances of it, with the devs giving everyone constant updates with each fix they pushed out. Overall, my honest opinion is that Greyzone Warfare is, right now, a mixed bag. It's got the bones of something that could be very special with meaningful PvP, quest progression, and a mixture of some amazing graphics and animations. That said, it's let down by some clunky mechanics and a fair few early access issues like bullet sponge AI, hit registry problems, crashes and bugs, not to mention a fairly polarizing faction system and some subpar audio. This isn't to say it's a bad game, rather I think they've got a lot of work to do and potentially need some reworks to fundamental systems before I'd consider it worth purchasing. The dev team seem like a great bunch and they've been listening to the extensive feedback they've been getting, so fingers crossed that by the time it releases it'll be worth picking up. But right now, I'd say they've got a long way to go. Now that's it from me in this one, folks. A very special thank you to the devs behind Greyzone Warfare for allowing me to take an early look at the game they've got cooking and form some opinions, and of course a very special thank you as well to all of my Patreon subscribers that support the channel. I'll see you all in the next one.